I now have the pleasure of recognizing the only pharmacist in the United States Congress, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Bright, for being here, and thank you for your service to our country. And before I begin, let me extend my condolences to those 80,000 plus who have lost their lives and to their families as a result of this pandemic, and a shout out to all of our healthcare professionals, as well as our other essential workers who have put their own health in danger in order to provide services to our citizens. Dr. Bright, it's my understanding that in 2017, BARDA funded a project with Applied Research Associates of Albuquerque to develop respirators that could be sanitized and reused during public health emergencies such as what we're going through today. However, according to recent reports by the Washington Post, none of these next generation respirators are available for us today. Why is that? Do you have any idea?
I'm not aware of that. So you're talking about the ventilators, sir, that we developed?
That's correct. I'm talking about those that were developed, the respirators that were developed and could be sanitized and reused during public health emergencies. It's my understanding that that was contracted and that that project was scrapped.
Sir, I'm not familiar with that project. Re-sanitize the respirators.
You're not familiar with that project, and you didn't sign off on that project to your knowledge?
I'm not familiar with that project, re-sanitize respirators.
Okay, fair enough if you're not familiar with it. Let me ask you this. We've had a lot of discussion today about hydroxychloroquine, about chloroquine, and I'm a little bit confused here because it's my understanding that this is what BARDA, do you want to clarify something here? I see you. Okay. It's my understanding that that's what the role of BARDA, the mission of BARDA is to look at things like this. In fact, when we in Congress allocate money to go toward this, that you are supposed to be looking, that BARDA is supposed to be looking at things that could possibly have merit, such as hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. And early on, it appeared that you embraced that. And early on, it seemed that you were in favor of looking at that. And I'm just wondering, because of this pandemic, because we didn't have any vaccine or any kind of agreed upon treatment, we should be testing, and that's what we are appropriating that money for. Would you agree with that? That that's what we are trying to do, is to look at what could possibly work and work with public companies to try to encourage them to come up with those kind of solutions?
Absolutely. We should look at all options and make sure we evaluate the potential risk and safety and benefit of those in the context of a randomized controlled clinical study. In the context of an emergency, we should move swiftly and get that clinical data as urgently and quickly as possible, but we should not proceed recklessly without that clinical data on its potential adverse events in an emergency.
So you're referring, when you say we should not proceed adversely, you're referring to hydroxychloroquine and the chloroquine?
We were promoting the standing up of randomized controlled clinical studies at the NIH with hydroxychloroquine. I worked with a company to even ask if they would donate drug to the NIH to be used in the context of a randomized controlled clinical study.
Right.
Yes, so that is what BARDA would do.
And in fact, I think you worked with the FDA to get an emergency use for hydroxychloroquine. Is that correct? And it was actually approved by the FDA.
That was in the context of the directive we received from the Secretary's office to stand up an expanded access protocol. Our clinicians.
So are you saying you were instructed to do that and you did it against your will, or?
So we were instructed to put in place an expanded access protocol. So in the context that Americans would be able to access this drug and not be under the close supervision of a physician. The scientists at FDA, NIH, CDC, and BARDA worked together to change that directive to the context of emergency use authorization with guardrails in there so patients would be under the close supervision of a physician.
Understood. Let me ask you this. Initially, you appeared to be encouraged by what could possibly be a result of the effect of hydroxychloroquine. When did that change? When did you sour, if you will, on the use of hydroxychloroquine?
I believe that we've seen many drugs that could have benefit, and some of these are really interesting things we'd never heard of, some we have.
I understand that, but my question was, when did you sour on it?
when it was determined that this drug should be made available to Americans outside the context of a close physician supervision. So I supported conducting a randomized controlled clinical study for hydroxychloroquine at the NIH. When I learned that there is a directive to make it more broadly available, not under close supervision of a physician, I was.
When was that? When did that directive go out?
That was March 23rd.
March 20, and that's the time that you decided, no, this is not what we should do, and we should not be looking at hydroxychloroquine at all.
I didn't think that was the proper, safe way to evaluate that drug in the context of this outbreak. I believe it should be only done under close supervision of a physician. When we put the EUA in place that locked this drug down to only be used in patients under close supervision of a physician, we were satisfied we had those guardrails in place. When an email string followed a week later saying, ignore the EUA, push this drug into the retail pharmacies in New York and New Jersey, that's when I became more concerned.
And who put that directive
Gentleman's
out?
time has expired.
Who put that directive out?
Gentleman's time has expired. You can answer, Dr. Bright.
Which directive, sir?
That it should be put out to the public without physicians approving it?
That directive was an email string that had a number of individuals on it, and I believe it first came from Dr. Giroir, the Assistant Secretary of Health. It indicated the White House was asking for that drug to be more broadly.
So was it because the president was encouraged by the use of this drug that you became discouraged by it?
It had nothing to do with politics, sir. I wanted to make sure that Americans were aware of the risk of this drug. It was only available under very safe.
But it is a drug that is indicated and has been used safely in the past.
By almost 1.5 minutes. You can finish your answer, Dr. Bright, and then we're going to move to the next member.
The drug had been used safely for malaria for a number of years. We didn't have a database.
But it's being used in the same dosage as it was used for malaria.
Please.